This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of bringing back to the podcast a friend of the square, seasoned executive, and someone we are going to be working with in 2025 to put deals together and explain how that's going to work. Brian Anderson, by way of Connecticut, on the road in Austin, Texas, an entrepreneur who has had success helping other companies grow and about to get his own little company platform in the near future in the Halo sector. So Brian, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks very much. Excited to be here.
So let's go back as far as you want to kind of tell us where you started and then some of the things you're working on now as basically a fractional, mentor / C-level executive, and where you want to take this to the next level, as you build out the next chapter.
Yeah, sure. So I'll be quick on the past, but up until let's call it 2014, I was easy to define, right? I ran companies. I was CEO of three companies over a 15-year span. Typical lower middle market, 50 to 100, $150 million companies where I'd go in, run something, grow it, typically owned by private equity or sell to private equity, exit and move on to the next thing, right? But those were long-term engagements. You're putting everything you have into 4 or 5 years to grow the hell out of something and make it valuable for shareholders. So I enjoyed that, and I had some really good runs. I mean, all three of those things in 15 years were high growth and nice exits. Like first one was in the outdoor apparel space, like 1 to 45 million. The second one was in the fitness accessory space. It was like 30 to 100 million. The last thing was in the action sports space that was, like to start up to 20 million. So that was all wonderful. My life changed a lot in 2014 and my career did as well. I became a single dad of 3 daughters, which is the most beautiful 10 years of my life. But I made a very conscious decision in 2014 to put my daughters first and my career second. And so opportunities that came to me after that, I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is a wonderful place to be in the private equity world and for the finance world. But it's not a great place to run companies, right? Because companies typically aren't headquartered there. They're on the West Coast or elsewhere. So anyway, I hunkered down in Greenwich and, put my daughters first over the last 10 years, pieced together what is still a pretty cool career. I've done a lot of very interesting things, but I very accidentally turned into kind of a fractional interim CEO guy. I give you an example right now, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this because, it's easy to do 2 or 3 things, but doing more than that is tough. But right now I'm fractionally running or helping run 3 different companies, right? One is Melt Method in the therapy space. One is Your Reformer, an amazing Pilates reformer brand that's launching in the US. Another one is Drop Fitness, which is a booking platform, a startup booking platform in the studio space. And I'm involved with an investment banking firm as an advisor. I'm working on 3 different startups right now. One is with a couple of professional athletes, Saquon Barkley, notably, in the youth sports performance market. One is in this women's sexual wellness space. And Pete, one is even in the cannabis space and the THC beverage and cannabis space. So it's kind of crazy, right? But I get, I have a lot of friends, people know me and they know what I've done in the past and they ask me to be involved, sometimes as an advisor, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes as a board member, and often to take an operating role. So it's cool. So Pete, you and I have talked about this in the past, but like your acronym HALO couldn't apply to me better because I have truly worked across all of those: sports, fitness, outdoor, active lifestyle. I'm not just a fitness industry guy. So I've done a lot of cool things and have my hands in a lot of pots. But what changes for me in the near future is that next August, my youngest of those 3 daughters will go off to college, which will give me the bandwidth and geographic flexibility to pursue my next thing.
Gotcha. So if somebody was to say, hey, we brought Brian in here, here's some of the things that he does that are kind of either unique or like has his own playbook on, what a couple of things that you highlight is like, here's how I'd approach or attack a situation And I don't go in there and kind of necessarily prescribe something that, is kind of just what was done before, but I really need to understand the DNA of a company and then the culture
Yeah.
of a company. And now, this is how I kind of drive things.
It's a really good question, Pete. To me, the very simple answer is the first thing I have to figure out is what they need, right? I mean, when you run companies, you have to be involved in all functions, right? You don't have a choice. So I've got pretty decent experience at every function from soup to nuts, from legal and finance and accounting and growth and growth and revenue generation and marketing and digital, and you have to be involved with all of it, right? The boring back end stuff and the sexy front end stuff. So I have enough experience at kind of any function of a company to contribute and help out. So when I get involved in a company, what I really need to understand is what are they good at and don't need my help, and what are they lacking and could use my help. And then I kind of work with the founder or the board to figure out, okay, you seem to be good at these 3 or 4 things. You could be better at these other 5 or 6 things. Let's focus on those and figure out how to make the company better in those ways. And so it really depends on what a company needs. Sometimes they need to grow. Sometimes they're a mess operationally and they need cleanup and efficient operation. Sometimes it's people, right? Sometimes the culture's wonky, or the members of the team, some of them aren't performing and it needs to be cleaned up and improved.
Got it. And when you take a look at some of the success stories on the fractional side, give us a little bit of insight into that. Went in there, this was the problem. I was able to figure out a way um, to address that or deliver that in a way that got buy-in, and basically the founder then, or whoever the stakeholders were, basically say, hey, look, even though he's fractional, like he's helping us drive the business externally,
Yeah.
Versus internally.
Yeah. Really, really good. There are a couple that come to mind. So last year I had the privilege of working with Pvolve. You're aware of Pvolve, right? It's kind of a darling in the industry now, franchise business, great low impact fitness modality. And I had the pleasure of working with them for about 6 months. Same thing. You sat down with Julie Cartwright, who's a beautiful leader. She's amazing at what she does, and just looked at the organization. Like, what are the weaknesses here? What can be improved? And plugged into a few holes to help out. And one example was product sourcing. They had beautiful product, but they were paying really high costs. So we worked on reducing their sourcing costs and delivered a solution that got their cost of goods down more than 20%, which is gigantic, right? And there were other functions of the business, with which we were involved as well. And I did that as a team. I did that with Mo Iqbal and also Deborah Strugo, both OGs in the industry. And we kind of each helped Julie at various functions. Deb sort of dove into franchising and studio operations. Mo dove into the tech side, and after a few months there, Pvolve was just operating a lot more smoothly and in good shape and improved their pro forma EBITDA by many millions. Which was cool. So that's an example. Awesome. Right now, I'm working with a U.S. startup, a company called Your Reformer that makes Pilates reformers and digital solutions for Pilates. They crushed it in Australia over the last couple of years, are just now launching in the U.S., and they're really good at D2C. They're really buttoned up at digital marketing and customer acquisition and building their list and selling to D2C. So they didn't really need me there, but what they need is exposure to the commercial market in the U.S., right? Gym chains and Pilates studios should be buying their product and using it because it's pretty awesome. And worked on some legal things and worked on some finance things. So it's kind of it just depends on what the client needs.
The one thing I find unique about you, and you can either validate this or not, is, you kind of go into these fractional opportunities and basically say, hey, I'm going to drive change. I'm going to try and move the needle. And then I'm going to figure out a way where you don't need me anymore. So is that like a mentality? Because a lot of consultants, a lot of people from the outside are basically trying to lock in a recurring revenue and saying hey, here's what I need to do. And let me create a new assignment for myself, where you seem to contact me on an episodic basis and be like, yeah, I went in there, I got it done. And now I'm working my way out of it instead of working my way deeper into it. Is that accurate?
Pete, I love it. Dude, so very much so. But dude, you know what I love about this? You're a Harvard MBA. I'm a Wharton guy. What is the first thing you learn about capitalism? For-profit companies exist for the benefit of their shareholders, period. Right? For their shareholders, not their employees, not their consultants, not their leader, not their whatever. It exists for the benefits of for the benefit of the shareholders. That is my job, right? If you're a CEO of a company, or if you're hired as a consultant, or if you're in any role, your job is to increase valuation, because that is what's right for shareholders. And, if all of us thought that way, companies would probably be a little more successful. But when I go into a situation, you're exactly right. I'm not trying to perpetuate my own deal. It's the opposite. I want to impact the business as positively as possible in a short period of time, get the company operating better and making more money, and then get out of the way unless they continue to need me. And it's not good for me, maybe, to not have an ongoing engagement, but it's what's right for shareholders, right? That's adding value. Like the election was 3 days ago. This is a perfectly analogous thing. I'm not going to talk politics because I hate it, but one of the things I can't stand about politics is that almost all of those people, all they're trying to do is get reelected, right? Everything is about trying to get that next election or get that promotion to the bigger position or whatever. And so they're not doing what's right in many cases for the country, for the state, for the city, for the town, for the whatever, because all they're doing is trying to get sound bites for the next gig. And when I work with a company, I don't want to do that. If it's, whether it's right for me is not the point. What's important is what's right for shareholders. So I want to improve EBITDA, help out, and get out.
I'd say every year or two, I get signed up on a deal, and then I realize like this is not going to work. And I get their wire information. I send them back their retainer. Have you been in situations where you're like, hey, this sounded great. You kind of said everybody's open to change. Everyone's open to like a fresh way of looking at things, that you got in there. You'd be like, look, I just don't, just either from a cultural standpoint, from like a product standpoint, it sounds good, but like, it's just, I don't think it's going to happen. Can you give us a little insight into certain things that you walked into and said, hey, look, I got an exit stage left here because I don't think you're going to be happy, and I'm definitely not going to be able to execute. Does that happen?
Yeah. Damn, Pete, you're good at this, man. I have been in situations like that. I'm not going to bring up specifics, but it happens, right? Sometimes it's cultural fit or a rub, or just things aren't good. Another reason for which that happens sometimes is what it takes to get a company created and off the ground is often a very different skill set and very different mentality than it takes to get it from off the ground to something bigger. I'm not good at the prior of those two things, but I'm pretty good at the latter of those two things. But in order for a strong founder-led business to work well with that person who's going to try to take it to the next level, you've got to collaborate well, right? And I've had some wonderful situations like that. Sue Hitzman at Melt Method, who you guys just interviewed recently. Sue is that strong founder. I came in to help the company make the company better. We work really well together because she didn't have pride of authorship. She sort of let go of the functions that, on which she trusted me to make it better. But there have been other situations where the founder just can't let go of their baby. And, and it's a little tricky, because if you're in an operating role, if you're in a W-2 operating role, then I'm going to do what's needed, right? But if you're in an advisory or consulting role, you're not really in a position to mandate what happens. All you can do is kind of advise and guide the shareholders on what's right. Sometimes it doesn't work out, right?
So that leads me to the question of like, when we work together in 2025, we say, okay, let's identify platforms. Platforms come in different shapes, different sizes in revenue and EBITDA. On my front, I've invested in 7 businesses, and they're all like Series A or like, friends and family hybrid Series A. And what I've learned, unfortunately, from experience, like I say all the time, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, is if you don't really have enough EBITDA for me to hire a team, or if you have like a great software platform, but you don't have any sales guys, and you don't have any money, and your investors are kind of worn out, or like you just can't keep going back because you're like the boy who cried wolf, like that doesn't really constitute a platform. So as you've kind of looked at like all the businesses you've worked with, either from a revenue standpoint or from an EBITDA standpoint of where you're starting from, do you say, look, I can't really affect change unless I have X amount of revenue and X amount of EBITDA? Because to me, that's like an Anderson platform, and anything else is like subscale. And like, I'm not a bootstrap guy. Like I want capital and I want to redeploy the capital. I want to get the return on that capital. And I don't want somebody to say, well, we're on an austerity budget. It's like if you're on an austerity budget, maybe I'm not the right guy to come in here. And maybe I'm not trying to take a distressed business and turn it into a healthy business. Maybe I'm trying to take like a healthy business that, is, I'll use like a, football analogy, went 8-8 last season. I think it's still 16 games, or 9-9, whatever they got on the new NFL format. And like, I'll take that team and I'll make them 12-4, and they'll get a buy into the playoffs. So as we think about, what do I want to run and like, what's the investment criteria? Where do you want to start from a platform? And then where would you say like the largest platform for me, where I could actually like double or triple the size of the company? I don't want to start a $50 million EBITDA company, because we're going to have to overpay for that. And that's probably pretty healthy. I want to start at 3. I want to start at 5. Like, what's your like sense of like size criteria?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the size question, but I want to throw an extra element of this, right? You're right. I'm not a bootstrap. Yeah, I'm not a bootstrap guy anymore. 20 years ago, I would have been. 20 years ago, you would have been, right? Sure. But you kind of get to a point where you've done a lot and you know the resources to pull in to make things better, but you need capital to do that. You need working capital, right? Or you need cash, right? So, but the one element you miss there, like, so what's the right revenue number? What's the right EBITDA number? Or is there a capital infusion that can get you there? Right, because that's a big part of it, right? A company can be not profitable, can have negative EBITDA, but as long as it's got the outside capital to give you what you need, then it's okay. So yeah, I'm kind of beyond the point of 20-some-year-old scrappy crazy startup, just make it happen out of thin air. I admire those people, but I'm not that person anymore. So I need some scale. So now I'll try to go to your answer on size. I'm not really very interested in going sort of sub 10 million in revenues unless I detect a lot of growth potential, right? If something's a $5 million thing and I really think it can be 25 or 50, sure, I'd take a crack, but I'm kind of more comfortable with 10, 20 and up. I've done companies that were 50, 100, up to 150, and I'm comfortable with that scale. But, I think my wheelhouse, it's not the pure startup world, even though I'm involved in a couple right now as an advisor or a board member. And now that I'm freeing up next summer, right, in terms of my personal life, I'm freeing up. A private equity group like L. Catterton or North Castle Partners or whomever might call on me and say, Brian, we've got this thing. We want you to turn it around. It's 200 million in revenues. Go for it, and I'm open to that. But I think my wheelhouse is kind of in that 10 to 50 range. It's sort of 10, $20 million company that we think we can triple. And by the way, if you can triple revenues from 10 or 20, you manage expenses carefully and EBITDA might be able to 10x, right? Or 5x on that. And that's I like that because at the end of the day, it's all about the exit for investors and for a leader, right? So like Pete, so if you and I do that thing in 2005, right? You either 25. Buy a platform in 2025, right? You either buy that thing that's 10, 20, and we say, hey, we think we can get this to 50, or we buy 4 things that are 10 million and say, okay, we just acquired 40 million in revenues and a little bit of EBITDA, maybe 5 million in EBITDA. But if we can grow that 40 to 60 or 80, even just 60, but we can synergize expenses on the back end and get EBITDA from 5 to 15, now you've got a valuable company. Now we sell that thing for $100 million, right? So, so scale either needs to come from what's existing now to give you the right resources, or it's got to be, or the core product and the core thing needs to have good growth potential.
And obviously, we're going to do a lot of work together and identify subcategories. But where's your passion, or like where do you kind of intuitively think like, hey, there's some opportunities in the Halo sector that either have great product but don't have good, brand awareness or affinity, or hey, parts of this industry like just they don't intuitively make sense on how it works, or maybe they think they're, maybe they think they're a technology company that, but they're basically like a outsourced, like managed service.
Yeah. Good question. I don't think of it, and I'm not thinking of it that way. And you and I need to have a good brainstorming session and talk through this. But what excites me is trends, like long-term trends in the industry that we know will have big legs in the future. Like I'm going to give you a couple of examples right now. So in the fitness world, and by the way, I'm not limited to the fitness world, because I think there is a very strong, wellness, whatever that is, right? I mean, wellness is thrown around a lot, but the shift from fitness to something much broader and in wellness is gigantic, and it's happening in every corner of the industry. So that's part of where my focus is, right? Like, fitness used to be go hard or go home, have a 12 pack, look as good as you can, etc. Now fitness has moved from cardio to strength, because we all realize that having good strength and muscle mass helps us as we get older, and it helps burn calories. It shifted from Eastern mindset to Western mindset, right? Like holistic Eastern mindset things. And I know you're big on that. Is, the world now gets that and understands it. And it's not just yoga and, sort of mind body things, but there's a, like look at psychedelics, right? Look at the acceptance and research going into mushrooms and psilocybin and other psychedelics. It's mind boggling. Like, it's like 5-10 years ago, there was the biggest taboo. And now the researchers from MIT and the government are looking into this stuff, right? And it's pretty amazing. Another trend I really like, Pete, is the shift away from alcohol and to THC and other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about that in fitness very much, but I've got a theory on this. So just to sort of frame it, the alcohol industry has been in decline for a number of years, like to the point where they're not in trouble. They're giant companies, but when you're running a giant CPG company, -5% a year is not a good thing. So a lot of strife right now in the alcohol industry. So why are people quitting alcohol? So a lot of people are quitting alcohol or significantly reducing alcohol intake. Why? Here's my theory. My theory is that the fitness industry has driven it. And what I mean by that is everyone with a wearable device, or a Ring, Apple Watch, Whoop, all of them, you realize that when you have a few drinks, you sleep like shit, right? You have terrible night's sleep. Your sleep score was a 62 instead of a 90, right? And seeing that over and over, I think people have said, this is not good for me. I'm not sleeping well. It's bad for my body. And so jump back to the business world. The non-alcoholic beer industry has exploded the last few years. THC beverages and anything cannabis related has absolutely freaking exploded. I don't know if you read this recently, but there are now more users of cannabis in the United States than there are users of alcohol, which is crazy, right?
I'm pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, nice. I love it. Yeah, I know you've been there for a long time. So those are I love trends like that. Also, women's wellness, right? Women were overlooked for such a long time, but physiological needs are different, and menopause and hormonal things, like all that stuff. I'm not an expert in it, but I have 3 daughters and a mom and a sister and loads of female friends, and that is an area that is receiving so much attention now. Some of it is health and physical and wellness and mind body, and some of it is moving toward the sexual side. And it's all, so those are the kind of trends that interest me. It's not another gym and another way to lift and things like that, even though I still love that stuff, but moving toward wellness, moving toward holistic, moving toward, away from alcohol, things like that.
Yeah. I'm shocked that people drink non-alcoholic beer. Like, if I could have like a, some kind of low calorie, energy drink I'll take that over a non-alcoholic beer, 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
So, Tools back in the day, I was like, what's that about? Anyway.
But that's a lot of these THC beverages, man, are like really tasty. They're like a high noon with no alcohol, but they've got 40 calories or 50 calories, and you get a nice little happy buzz from it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, a lot of private equity funds traditionally have had prohibitions on investing in those types of markets or products. It's kind of interesting when you see, like, I was looking at a newspaper. I think it was somewhere in, it was in LA, and I saw like an ad for like 20% off like ketamine. I'm like, ketamine, that's like special K. That's what like kids take it like at like rave parties. And now it's in there as like a PTSD,
Totally.
Anti-depression, treatment. So I'm with you. All right. Well, look, this is the kind of recap I wanted to do. Give a little people an insight into how you think about opportunities, and some of the past, success stories. So, you'll look forward to getting this podcast out. And if there are private equity funds that are looking for a top executive to back, we're going to go and try and find a deal or deals on paper, and then bring them to get funded, and not participate in auction processes, and overpay. We want to go in there with a thesis, and we want to go in there and say, hey, this is what we think we could do, with
Yeah.
this company where it is today versus what it should look like, in 3 to 5 years. So
I love that, Peter. And we know the investment world loves that, right? Because if you sit at a desk at a private equity group and your staff is looking at 100 books coming through every month and you're just bidding against, so people like you and I know the industry. We know people. We have friendships of people who found these companies and own them. So being able to bring proprietary deals to the table, I think, has a lot of value. I look forward to doing it with you, buddy.
awesome. All right, man. Have a good holiday, and congrats on what you built on the family side and the fractional side. And now we'll get one to call the Susan Anderson fully baked deal.
Sounds good, buddy.
Awesome.